What's going on, YouTube? We're back at it for another video, and today we're going to be talking about how to play the demon inside of Evil Dead the game. Now, focus of this gameplay footage is going to be utilizing the Necromancer. There are two other demons that have differing abilities compared to the Necromancer, but with the tips, tricks, and strategies I'll be showcasing inside of this gameplay footage, they will be transferable over to those other demons, especially for the beginning and middle portion of the game when you're really trying to ramp up that power and become an overwhelming force against the survivors. Now, for me personally, huge fan of Army of Darkness, so had to go with that Evil Ash first. I will be doing videos on those other two demons later, but with the Necromancer, I believe he is the beginner-friendly demon to play as. He can become an overwhelming force. He can raise a lot of those skeletons, and at the same time, they do have shields. They can be a bit more defensive against some of those survivors' attacks, especially if they have weaker weapons. It can be a huge power play, and can just be a really easy one to overwhelm the survivors with without using too much strategy, but you will still need it, especially as time progresses. In the beginning, you may have heard recently that the demons are extremely overpowered. Trust me when I say, as soon as people start understanding the survivors, get them leveled up, even midway through, getting a lot of those nodes checked out through their skill trees, they're going to be pretty powerful soon enough, and you're going to see a transfer of power pretty soon that is going to make a lot of the tips, tricks, and strategies you'll see in this gameplay footage even more useful, that you're going to have to be applying that pressure constantly and utilizing different techniques as you're getting into that late game just to take down these survivors as soon as they start figuring out what they're doing. For right now, it is pretty close to a 95% win ratio with the strategies I'm about to showcase with this gameplay footage. But that being said, you'll also notice giant skill tree on the screen. We're not going to go too in-depth with this. Trust me, that's for a completely different video later on, which I'll showcase, which nodes you want to go as you're going through each level that are going to give you that highest percentage of win ratio and just make you an overwhelming force against those survivors. But the three things I will say is Rocksteady Elite, Rocksteady Basic, and Rocksteady Boss. Now, each one of these is going to further increase the resistance to the balance bar damage. What the balance bar damage is essentially once that gets depleted, you will be staggered or stunned for a moment. You essentially have either your units or your boss character sitting in place, kind of head hung over, and free pickings for any survivors to just completely deal out a lot of damage. And at the same time, for your basic or elite units, this is one of those moments where survivors can deal a finishing move, which in that finishing move they actually become invulnerable to any damage for a couple of seconds, which can be frustrating, and I'll point that out for you once we get to it in the gameplay footage, because in that moment, if you're playing the boss character, you start swinging on them, you're not going to be dealing any damage when you could have been dealing damage to somebody else on their team. Could be one of those moments you also been taking damage at that same point. But on that note, we've got more than a few things to cover, so let's get straight into that gameplay footage. Now, at the beginning of the match, we'll be spawned into a random location on the map, but the first thing that we're going to want to do is start gathering up some of that infernal energy and start setting up some of the traps around us. Now, they may be in an obscure location where we spawn that may not be something that the survivors actually go through, but we want to maximize as much XP gain as we possibly can in that early game, as not only is setting up the traps, but also gathering the infernal energy is going to give us a substantial amount of XP at the very beginning. It may not be that noticeable later on, but at the very beginning, it's going to be the best way for us to really get some of those infernal upgrade points as quick as possible. Now, the first thing that I do as I'm kind of progressing from that area is immediately start going to one of the closest of the two objectives. Now, sometimes these can be halfway across the map, pretty far distance. In those moments, you want to make sure that you're not just holding on to a maxed out infernal energy bar, as you're not gaining any XP in that moment if you're passing through some of them. Sometimes you could be passing through 6 or 10 or possibly even more of them, and that's a lot of missed XP gain that you'll be having in that moment and wasted time overall. So in those moments when they could be fairly far away, it's a good idea to kind of stop at certain locations, set up some of those traps, spin that point or spin some of those points, and continuously have that even flow of XP coming in as we get those levels for a demon and gaining those infernal upgrade points. Now, you'll notice we're right next to the Necronomicon page. The first thing I like to do is set up a perimeter around each one of these objectives, as we know the survivors are eventually going to end up over here at some point. So we want to make sure that as soon as they get here, everything's set up. We don't have to scramble, start getting some of that infernal energy, setting these up as they come through. We want to make sure that this is ready for them, and we're going to give them a really hard time as they're coming through here. as the first thing that we're going to upgrade as the demon is going to be the traps themselves. Now, once we upgrade the traps abilities all the way to their max, each one of the bear trap symbols that we see just kind of sitting off to their own, not the ones attached to the trees or the crates, those are now going to spawn an elite unit every time they get triggered. So survivor comes up walking path through one of these paths, gets to trigger that, immediately your elite unit pops out of that, deals a bit of damage right off the bat, and not only is it going to be one of the hardest hitting but hardest to take down of your units besides the boss himself. But you'll notice there's quite a bit of them all over the place, and that's why I say we're setting up the perimeter around here. We're making sure that every spot that they'll possibly come through, we're going to have some opportunity to either slow them down, deal some damage, waste some of their resources. And you'll notice right now we're heading over to the objectives. Now, they're not always going to be as close as they are in this match. In some of those moments where you're possibly having them both pretty far away from each other, like I said before, it's a good idea to set up some of those traps, but even more so in between both of those objectives, as this may be one of those locations that they'll be passing through. So any of the buildings coming through there, any of the crates, the trees, try to set up as many as you possibly can. And now, some of these locations may be a bit larger. They could be like the sawmill or some other locations that are fairly large. There could be a whole lot of traps that you could set up. You don't necessarily have to make every single one of them. Just make sure that the surrounding area of the objective is pretty covered pretty well, or any of those entrances and exits that you know for a fact some of those survivors might be going through. Now, you'll notice we just got the 4th point. Now, I like to put the that 4th point straight into the elite unit himself. Not only does it give us the ability to spawn them in, but it gives us more damage and defenses for those elite units that will be spawning out of the traps that we have set already. Now, in this moment, I believe this is the point where I've decided we're going to go on the hunt. You'll notice one of the survivors has spawned or made some noise, essentially. So now we know the location of them. Anytime that you see them make a noise in that top left corner, open up the map, check where their location is. I felt like I had already set up as many of the traps as possible that I needed to. Now, another one of those moments where as you're coming through, you may notice that red exclamation point. This is going to be a piece of the map that they'll need in order to figure out where those 2 objective locations are. So we know they're going to come through here, so we're going to set up the traps in this location. We're going to make sure we're giving them another one of those hard moments. We're just eating away at their time, eating away at their resources, gaining XP from each of these moments that they get hit by one of these traps. And it's just going to further help us along the way and keep that pressure up on each one of the survivors that may be coming through here. Now, with this gameplay footage, obviously, I chose this one for a specific reason, and it was because this team of survivors was actually working together pretty well. They had a healer on their team. I'll point out who Cheryl is. Trust me, she's going to be a thorn in your side with her healing ability that is an AoE that can bring everybody up to max health really quickly. Can be extremely frustrating to deal with, especially if you're in that middle of that objective. You're playing as the boss unit. You've got one character on the edge of being downed, and straight away she just drops that healing. That's why I say there is going to be a shift of power coming up here soon, that you'll notice that these survivors can be extremely overpowered compared to the demons themselves. Now, you'll have noticed that I've lunged at one of the survivors just a moment ago. That's going to be our dash ability. What that's going to do is further promote fear and gain infernal energy from however many that we've hit. It'll also promote a jump screen on the top of the player's screen as soon as they get hit by it. Now, in that moment, you'll notice Henry the Red was red, funny enough. And that is one of those cues when we know that we can actually possess one of the survivors. Now, sadly enough, one of those tips right there, maybe with their gun we can hurt the car that the other survivor's in, but if you go up and try to melee it, sadly enough, it's not going to deal any damage. Now, from this point, we're just going to start following the survivors to wherever they go. Obviously, we can't really do much with them being in the vehicle. Now, occasionally they will be slowed down from the rough terrain if they're trying to cut through some of that wooded area. You may be able to catch up with them and possess the vehicle, but not always is that going to be the immediate thing that you need to do or try to get done. Sometimes you're just going to have to follow them. The vehicles, if they're able to get on that open stretch of road and get max speed, they are going to get a bit ahead of you, but no matter what, we're going to be able to tail them all the way to their next location. Now, they're going to be stopping over here, so we're going to start setting up some of those traps. Now, the name of the game here is not always to go for the kill immediately. You know, you can set those moments up here and there. There's going to be opportunities for it, but also another thing to note, I had a bit of tunnel vision there. Could have been upgrading those points along the way. Sadly enough, we can't keep moving while we're upgrading in that menu, but at this point we're trying to gain some of that XP by constantly setting up some of these traps, as we know they're going to start moving through this area. So any of those locations we know they may be going through, you'll notice I didn't, or probably shouldn't have set that trap. Nobody really goes up underneath there. If there was a chest down there, I should have spawned it in, but more than likely nobody's going under there. But the one outside of that, Henry the Red did hit. But name of the game, we're just trying to give them that pressure. We're trying to gain that XP so that way later on we can get those more powerful units. You know, I could have spawned in some more of those basic units right there. He's closed in, but you'll notice we have the dark ones over here. This is a bit of a frustrating thing to me. I don't believe the maps that the survivors are trying to gain should be right next to that in-game event with the dark ones. It's kind of frustrating in a way, but at the same time it can pose to be useful. Now this is an excellent moment for me to point out one of my mistakes. With this possession, I should have ran her into the dark ones and started just wasting her ammo. Sometimes that's going to be how you utilize that possession. Instead of going in, wasting all that infernal energy and not ending up hitting Henry the Red even one time. Sometimes it's all about wasting their resources when it comes to their ammo and putting them in harm's way. You can also run them into one of the traps that you've set up as well. That could be an excellent play. Just throw them into that. As soon as they gain control again, they'll move even a fraction of an inch, and then boom, they're going to set that trap up. Even if they're standing on top of that trap and you set it right as they're fighting a unit, boom. Now, there's going to be the moment where we finally utilize the dash properly. We've just spawned into some units before that, wasted some of our infernal energy, didn't have enough for more, but we hit 3 targets with that. They were closed in. You're not always going to be able to hit all 3 or possibly even 2. Sometimes it's just going to be 1, but you will get a substantial amount of that infernal energy from just hitting one of them and further increase that fear on the units. Now at this point, again, you know, sometimes you want to sit there and watch the carnage, but most of the time you got to be on that job, going and grabbing up more of that infernal energy so you can spit some more of those units at and give a little bit more of that pressure. Now you'll notice you're gonna kind of have to keep an eye on all of the units at the same time. It can be a bit overbearing at certain moments, but at the same time you want to keep an eye on them, see where they're going. Like with this moment, we noticed they went into that shed. They got the final piece of the map itself. But there was also a trap just outside the entrance, which is the only exit. We spawned in a couple more units, and you'll notice I actually just spawned in the flute guy. Now that's going to be the left ability that you'll notice has a 60-second cooldown right now. Now with that one, it's going to be, essentially that flute's going to buff all of our units, even including our boss unit. It's going to give us a 50% increase to damage to all of our units and 30% damage reduction, as well as lasting for 75 seconds. It has a fairly large radius, and you want to put the flute player in an obscure location, one that's not easily seen by the survivors. It definitely only takes about 2 shots with some of the survivors' weapons in order to take that down, and a lot of times if you're facing off with good survivors, they know what that flute guy is going to do, so you want to make sure you put him in a location that's not easily accessible by those survivors. That way you can maximize that damage buff and damage reduction. So that way you're really applying the pressure to some of those, or to the survivors essentially. Now you notice the survivors had a good bit of fear on them, so immediately they're deciding that they're going to go over to the campfire. Now in this moment we were able to hit 2 of them, really just trying to apply some of that pressure, gain some more of that experience, just spawn in some units, make sure that we're just getting a little bit of that damage in, constantly just slowing them down. Sometimes it's just about eating away their time, slowing them down from the next objective. And as you'll notice, I immediately took their car, which is going to be the thing that they were going to be able to get away and get over to one of the 2 objectives as quick as possible. Sometimes, or generally, you know, sometimes it is fun to ram them with a car, but it's not really effective. You don't really get much damage out of it, and a lot of times they'll be able to knock you out of the possession of that car fairly quickly. So what I like to do is drive their vehicle away from them, make sure that they're having to force themselves to go on foot, or possibly like with this moment, there was a couple of cars right next to it. They went back for this bus, so I took that one as well. Now this one didn't end up going as well as I wanted it to, as I got stuck on that pole right there. I tried to drive it away. Sometimes that's how it's going to happen, but we slowed them down a bit. We ate a bit more of their time, and we're going to gather a bit more of that infernal energy and then come back for the possession of the vehicle again. Now they're a bit slow right now. We're trying to get close enough to grab it, but another one of those moments where they've got that max speed, they're able to get away, but we come in close enough, grab the vehicle, then we take it from them. We're eating more that time. We're forcing them to go on foot, deal with some of the common units that are hanging around through the areas. Now, this one's a bit funny. It is a good idea to kind of ditch it in a way that they'll never be able to come back and grab it. Just stack that vehicle. They'll never be able to use it again. Now, you notice they don't have much for another vehicle to go around, but we've got them trapped in another location. We're just trying to disorient them, gain more of that XP. I've got another point to spend right now I should be using. Now, when it comes to spending points, Infernal Energy and upgrading the units are generally what I go for first. Another one of those moments, remember that with the tree, you can set the trap, it'll trigger it, and then you can possess it to deal another strike. Again, another one of those moments where we're utilizing that dash ability to gain the ability to spawn more units, but I thought since they already started to run, we're going to save that Infernal Energy. We're going to make sure that we have it ready for whatever location next that they spawn at. And at the same time, we need that Infernal Energy in order to spend on some of those traps that they may be coming across as we go along the way. And another good idea is to also upgrade the possession skill tree. It's going to further increase the health of the unit that you possess and increase the damage. Now, possessing your own units can be a bit of a power play. It will be eating away at your Infernal Energy the longer you're in it, but there are nodes that make it to where it costs less in order to or the longer you're in that. Now, by the time they make it to the first objective, you want to have put at least one node into the boss unit. That way we can spawn that in. Now, with the Necromancer, or Evil Ash himself, we have two special abilities that are going to be very unique. Our X ability, which is going to be the one in the middle, is going to be one where we spawn skeletons, and our Y ability is one that gives us an aura around us where any of the skeletons that die within that aura immediately resurrect. Now, there are nodes on the skill tree that further increase the radius of this. It's not exactly the largest, and there's one that further increases the time that it's available. I believe it's only 20 seconds before you get the nodes, and I believe after you've upgraded the nodes, it's about 35 seconds that it'll last. But that's one of those power plays after you've upgraded the units. You've got 3 at a time coming out of the basic skeletons, and then I believe after fully upgraded on the elite units, 2 of them will come out. If you can maintain those constantly being able to come up, it's going to be a huge power play. And Evil Ash himself can be a devastating force. One thing to look out for, key note right here, is going to be the B ability. We will be able to, it's undodgeable as well, grab one of, or essentially force choke one of the survivors and drain health from them and give it back to ourselves. Now, the big problem with any of the demons themselves, that is recently something that survivors are figuring out. If they gang up on you, they can get that stagger chance on you, and it's going to be problematic for you. If you can somehow finagle a moment where everybody's kind of in disarray, making sure that each one of those survivors is kind of off on their own and they're not ganging up on you. If they do start to gang up on you, you may need to dodge away, move around to some of your other units, and then make sure that they're the cannon fodder. That way you can hone in on one target at a time. But at the same time, with the Evil Ash, you will have a wide swing or cleave with your weapons. So if there's 3 of them in front of you, you're going to be hitting all 3 of them and dealing a massive amount of damage. Now, that's just with the level 1 boss. After you've upgraded it all the way, or possibly even upgraded it in the skill tree, it's going to be even more devastating. And you'll notice that as we progress further into this gameplay footage. Now, from this point, they did capture that objective, and if any of the characters that die, or if any of the survivors die in that moment, and they do complete that objective, all of them will be rezzed again. Now, I can't remember if it was actually all the way up to full life or not, but they will still have a substantial amount of health, and they will be able to have all their items again. Whereas if they did die without the ability of getting resurrected from one of those objectives, then they'd have to come back and grab up all of their stuff. Essentially, they would collect their soul, go back to one of the altars, and be able to bring them back from there, and then they'd have to run back and grab up all the consumable items they may have had. Now, yet again, they tried to get another car, so I took it from them and drove it off into the woods, somewhere far away, to where, trying to stack it to where they can't use it again, but sometimes it doesn't always go your way. More than likely, it's going to go the way you don't want it to when you most need it, especially on the survivor side of things. But this actually ended up being a fairly decent play. Things like this can actually work to your advantage. As you'll notice, they actually went back into the cabin itself. We've got them closed in inside of a small environment. And from this point, I'm able to actually get inside, spawn some of the traps, or set up some of the traps, and then actually deal some damage to them while they're stuck inside. Now, you really want to look for the weak links. You want to wait until they separate. You don't always want to just go gung-ho dropping some units in if they're all together inside of that small, tiny space. Sometimes that will inevitably just cause your units to essentially die really quickly, whereas you'll notice right here, there's only 2 of them in there. They're already fighting something from one of the traps I set, and I double spawned in 2 of the basic units, so we've got 6 units right there. We put the totem, or the flute guy, in the back. Now generally I would say that's a very poor placement, but in this moment when they're completely surrounded, they're getting overwhelmed, it sometimes can be that small little moment that's going to help us out in a big way. That'll just give them that damage reduction. We've got a large mass of those units, and then also giving them that amplified 50% damage can really take its toll, especially in a small confined space where they're constantly getting stun locked by the amount that are getting hit by them, as well as that damage reduction does further increase their balance bar. I believe it does. It seems like it does every time that I've faced with some of the common units when I've had a Necromancer place his flute down. It's very frustrating, to say the least. But when we're playing as a Necro, oh yeah, Evil Ash is getting it done. Now from that point they did start to head out, and they did find themselves over at another one of those campfires to take down some of their fear. Now we're just going to apply a little bit more of that pressure, just adding a few basic units, taking control of the tree, seeing what their health's looking like. You already noticed that. I believe that's Ash over there. No, it's not Ash. That's the Evil Dead 2 guy. I can't remember his name, but we possess Henry the Red right here. Now, I don't know what Henry the Red has on his skill tree, or whether or not we actually gain the ability of their skill tree and their power as that survivor, but man, I'll tell you right now, I'm going to possess Henry the Red more times than often, because he just beat the living mess out of that guy like it was nothing. That guy just got stun locked, couldn't do anything back, couldn't even dodge. Now, sadly enough, one of the Ash characters or survivors that we can play does have an ability to depossess someone, or essentially just exorcising them out of any of your units. It could be one of your own units, it could be one of the possessions of one of the other survivors. Any of those moments he can pop that ability and push you out of it. So that's what happened there. So do be on the lookout for that one. I believe that Ash is going to be the one out of the leader category. Can't remember specifically, but I believe that was the one. Now from that point we're just going to gather a bit more of that infernal energy. We're going to see what we've got here. They've obviously gotten 2 cars, as they know I'm going to be taking some of them. 2 of the other ones went out, grabbed up those 2 cars, brought them on back while we were toying around with them. Each time, we're just constantly adding that pressure, making them waste those resources. Every time that they get downed, they've got to use more of that healing, more of their ambulance for shielding. And what we're trying to do is pretty much exhaust everything they have by the time we get to the one final event. Not necessarily do we always make it to that final event. Sometimes we're able to finish them off at either one of these objectives, or even before then if they're really bad. But for the most part, if you're dealing with a solid group of well-coordinated and upgraded survivors, they're going to make it all the way to the end. They're going to be able to withstand some of your attacks, and it's going to be a battle of attrition constantly, all the way up until that final moment. That's why I say, the name of the game is more about constantly adding that pressure, gaining the XP, getting those upgrade points. That way, when we do get to those crescendo moments, we've got the power to really put the pressure on them, really exhaust their resources, or possibly immediately wipe them out in moments like this. Now you'll notice in that moment we've got another one of those moments where they're gathering the objective. One thing to note also with the objective, we constantly gain infernal energy, if you didn't notice that the first time. Forgot to actually mention that, but you'll notice we have some smarter survivors here. They definitely went for that flute guy immediately. Didn't exactly give it the best positioning on that one. I more than likely should have put it somewhere inside of the house, somewhere that they couldn't really notice. It does have quite a large radius to it for buffing those units that you have, and if you can maintain that stack on all your units, including the boss unit himself, Evil Ash, I mean, I'm telling you right now, just that one flute guy with just a few of the nodes filled out on that skill tree can be all you really need in order to really take down the entire survivors team. But maintaining that flute guy is the problem, and with those smart survivors, they're going to hunt down that thing and make sure that they take it out. Now you'll notice I get to one of those moments, we're filling out the rest of the skill points. We've got a lot of those points. The last thing that I go for is possession, essentially, when it comes to the skill points as we're progressing through the game, as I feel as though the boss and the units are the real power play for this. A lot of times late games when the possession's really going to become powerful. Now this is one of those problematic moments where they all start to gang up on you. They really don't focus on the enemy units, or they're able to take them out fairly quickly considering you don't have that flute buff on them, or they're just working as a really good coordinated team. They've made sure that they've got those finishing moves. Maybe by this point they have upgraded weapons that are really powerful. They're really emphasizing the ability of their skill tree points and just giving them everything that they need in order to combat against you. Now, in moments like that, once you finally go down, possession is going to be one of the more powerful tools at your disposal, and arguably should have went for Henry the Red on that moment. He definitely did stun lock me again, just like I did when I possessed him against the other one. But another keynote moment right here, you'll notice she's stuck in that animation for the finisher. That is one of those moments where they're going to become invulnerable to any damage. On the survivor side of thing, that is actually an excellent strat if you're trying to avoid damage from the boss, trying to hold out that timer to get that objective. If you've got high balance bar damage on any of your weapons or possibly from your skill tree, you can utilize that in order to constantly get stuck in that animation to where the boss can't damage you and wait out that time and win. Look out for people trying to do that in those moments. I'm not exactly sure how we can really combat that as a demon player, but more than likely possession is going to be your best bet in a moment like that. Try to gain that fear on top of that person, hit them with something else. But if you're stuck in the boss and that's where you're trying to play it, because I've done it to other demons inside of my survivor gameplay, quite interesting. Now you'll notice they did finish that objective. They did fairly well in that moment. The survivor group was doing quite the bang up job compared to a lot of the other players that I've actually faced off with. That healer doing another bang up job. You'll see her doing a little bit more, but you'll notice we're back at where the dark ones are. They finished that one, exercised us over here, so we're just going to start hitting up some of those traps over here, getting that ready for them. But luckily enough, as you'll see coming forward, we didn't exactly need all of those traps, but you'll see that here in a moment. Now from that point, after we've pretty much gotten all the traps that we needed to set over there, we'll start heading out, trying to find where they are. Now, smart survivors will take this time as that evil mist is coming in to actually go and loot and restock some of their things. As you'll notice in the bottom left, 3 of these survivors do have the maxed out shield capacity for some of those amulets, but they're not able to fill them. Obviously, we have dwindled down their resources. They're not able to maintain that health, and arguably Cheryl might be carrying this team with her healing ability. It may be that they don't even have much of the Shimp's Cola anymore. They may have been popping those and don't have much left to actually go on, because that can be a problematic experience, even on the survivor side. The many times that I've played, a lot of times just getting dwindled of all of your resources could be the reason that you end up failing, and not the fact that you're not able to combat with that demon. If they're just constantly hammering you, getting into your face, really dropping your health consistently, downing people, or if you just have one guy on your team that's really bad and starts taking some of your resources, sometimes it's a good idea to cut them off like a good bartender. But on that same note, we go out, we're trying to basically slow them down, either trap them in the storm. That is another strat that can be used, especially if they do go out and try to go and hit some of those spots that they never hit before the 2 objectives, trying to get some more of that loot, rejuvenate some of their stockpile. But at the same time, we want to go in, want to possess a couple of them, waste some of their ammo, get some damage done on them, and really just give them a rough time as they're trying to make it to that next objective. And anytime that they're trying to take one of those vehicles, also want to be able to take that away from them, drive it off into the distance. Now, this is one of those moments where I didn't have enough infernal energy to take control of their car, but you'll see what happens shortly. Like I said before, sometimes the things you don't want to happen when you need them not to, which, bad driver over here, definitely stacked that real quick. Sometimes cutting across those wooded fields is definitely not the play, and sticking to the main roads can be the best path for you, essentially. But from this point, we're going to spawn a couple of units in front of them. We're going to go gather some more of that infernal energy. It is a good idea to just consistently keep spawning things in front of them, or possibly in this general area as they come, or as they're coming in, they're going to be hit up with that before they can even get in to damage the dark ones. Now, this was an excellent play right here. I was able to possess the other Ash character, I believe it is, and I was able to pretty much stun lock these guys with these shotgun shells. And finally, the Evil Dead 2 guy actually noticed that I was using the gun, and he decided to use his own gun, got me a bit stun locked. But lucky enough, we were still able to waste a good bit of those shells and deal a good bit of damage. It wasn't something that would actually take him down, but at the same time, we stopped them from closing in. And by this point, they've lost a good bit of health. They're trying to regroup right now. This is one of those moments where it really does seem like they're really low on supplies. They don't have any shimps. They're really relying on Cheryl for the healing ability. Cheryl may also be carrying a lot of the shimps, which could be a problematic experience considering there is a node for her that actually, as soon as she drinks one, it also gives the rest of the team in a close area the health. But if she's not close by them, it doesn't help them at all. So if she's being a selfish player by trying to heal herself in one of those moments, she could be wasting the resources. It's good to use the survivors against themselves in certain moments, especially if they're trying to save themselves. Those selfish tendencies can be the downfall of a team. Look for the weak links. That's going to be a very excellent power play in that moment. Now, in that moment, you may have noticed that Cheryl did drop her ability and it was going off, but she didn't get healing. There is a node on the Necromancer skill tree that once we hit somebody with Evil Ash, they can't heal from any source for 1 second each, and that'll consistently stack for each time that we hit them. So in that moment, I was able to consistently hit her enough to where she was not able to gain the healing from her own ability. Now, at this moment, obviously, the Dark Ones are attacking at the same time that we're attacking. I've got that flute going off right now. You'll notice it from the red aura around everybody's head. They're not able to find it. They're disoriented, and we're able to take them out fairly quickly. But kudos to Cheryl. She did end up rezzing 2 of them, but it still was not enough to combat with all the forces that we had available to us in that moment. A lot of things could have been done differently with this Survivor team, but I think ultimately what did end them was the fact that we chose that battle of attrition, not constantly trying to go in for the kill, except for in those moments when we were on the objectives, not wasting some of that infernal energy, but just dwindling down their resources, constantly adding pain to them. Just keeping the pressure on them is going to be the ultimate strat to taking down these survivors. As they get stronger, as they get more knowledgeable with how their characters work and how their teamwork can be better improved upon, it's going to happen as we continue through the game. And I'm guaranteeing you right now, there's going to be a lot of meta set 4-man builds. There's going to be a lot of videos that I'll also be doing with working with some of those survivors and how to make some power play combinations, some great builds when it comes to certain skill trees that you want to go for that's going to give you that advantage to overcome some of those demons out there. But at the same time, playing a demon, it's an enjoyable experience. And ultimately, after everything, at the end of the day, have fun with it. Don't stress over it. In certain moments, as playing as a survivor, I've seen multiple people just quit halfway through the game playing as the demon because they thought they weren't doing too good. You noticed right there on the second objective, that didn't look all that great, but I didn't give up. I wasn't stopped having fun right there, and I knew it wasn't over. It's not over until I see that book and that timer go off. All right, and that book's not dead, because I'll be going after that thing. But at the end of the day, man, it's just an enjoyable experience. I thoroughly enjoy playing as Evil Ash as well, and the next one I will be going to is the Puppeteer. I believe the Puppeteer is actually more powerful. I will say that. I think he has a stronger boss. In my opinion, he's able to stun lock everybody. He moves really quickly. He can go invisible, but you can still hit him. So there's a lot to talk about with that one. More content coming like this in the future. But that's going to be the end, or that's going to wrap up that video for us. If you'd like to see some of this content live, hit that link down in the description. Follow me over at Twitch. I'll be streaming this daily. Also, at the same time, I've got a link to the Discord down below. I'll be trying to gather some people. I'll make a channel for the Evil Dead over there for people to communicate with other people if you're looking for other survivors. Possibly going to try and get some private matches going as well, where we play with viewers or just play with anybody that comes into the Discord. You know, if you're one of those people that doesn't really have time to watch the stream, hey, it's not absolutely necessary. I greatly appreciate you watching the video, but anytime you're looking to play at the same time, head on into that Discord. If you're looking to meet up with some other people that may need or have some better knowledge when it comes to playing as a survivor rather than just some off randoms. But at the same time, if you'd like to see more content like this as well, hit that subscribe button. That's going to be it, guys. Hopefully this helped you out. Hopefully you enjoyed, and have a good one.